Oliver Heath, thank you very much for zooming in with me today.
That's a pleasure.
Now, you are a specialist in biophilic design.
That's right. Yes.
Would you like to explain what you do and what biophilic design is for anyone who hasn't heard that term before?
Yeah. So I run an architectural and interior design company. So we cover all the kind of regular approaches to design in terms of kind of functionality and how we deliver projects. But my particular focus is in sustainability and how we create buildings that react to our changing world. Part of that is about how we reduce the impact on buildings, how we reduce our use of basic resources like materials, gas and water and electricity. But the other part of sustainability is much more human-centered, and it's how we look at designing buildings that suit human needs. And in particular, how we create spaces that make you feel happy and healthy. So fundamental to that in our approach is this area of biophilic design, which essentially is how we improve the human connection to nature in the busy, noisy, stressful spaces that we inhabit, as a means to create spaces that are more calming, more restful, where we experience less stress, but also that help us to recuperate from periods of physical or mental fatigue.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. It's a lot more involved than I originally thought it was. When I read about biophilic design, a lot of the literature I read was very much in connection with add plants to your office to reduce stress, but it seems a lot more holistic.
Absolutely. I mean, there are three key concepts to biophilic design. The first is what we call a direct connection to nature. And this is obviously very multisensory and very powerful for us as human beings because we've evolved for vast amounts of time throughout human evolution in very close connection to nature, a nature that we relied on for our basic survival, but also to thrive and prosper. So that direct connection is really important. So it's how we add plants and trees and views onto those, but also water and fresh air into spaces and connect with the kind of annual cycle of things. That's the direct connection. Then we have, importantly, other areas such as the indirect connection. And this is how we mimic or evoke a feeling of nature in spaces using natural materials, colors, textures, patterns, and even technology. And the third one is what we call the human spatial response. And this is how we create buildings that are exciting and aspirational and sustainable and stimulating, but also calming, relaxing, and restorative. And we've got to have all of those kind of aspects to create spaces that suit our ever-changing emotional, physical, and psychological needs throughout the day.
So when you're working with a client, let's say it's a corporate client and it's an office space, where do they even start if this is something they want to include? Where do they even start?
Well, the first place to start is to undertake what we call a pre and post occupancy evaluation. There's no point starting a project and spending lots and lots of money on installing features if you don't really know what the problem is. Very often we'll get a brief from a client that says, well, we've got 100 staff, we need 5 meeting rooms, we need 80 desks, we need this, this, and this. And you're essentially going, well, look, here's a series of little blocks. What we do is go back to them and say, okay, well, let's undertake a proper evaluation of the space that you're working in at the moment. We'll look at the quantitative things, like the things that you can measure, things like absenteeism, staff turnover, maybe temperature, humidity, light levels, acoustics, all those measurable things. But importantly, we'll also take a more human-centered approach to the more qualitative aspects. So we'll ask people how they feel, whether they're feeling productive, creative, whether they feel like they've managed to do a good day's work, and how they feel about a space in general, and whether they feel proud about it, whether it represents the core values of the company.
What type of issues do clients come to you with? Is it about staff feeling stressed or the high number of sick days, or does anyone ever mention sick building syndrome? What are you solving? What are those problems?
Well, those are some of the issues that I think often people don't recognize as really being a part of a design brief. They don't really see that air quality might kind of feed into it. We are starting to see a change. I think more often than not, we're seeing a more traditional, long-standing existing companies recognizing that they're not delivering on the workplace efficiently, that they're not managing to attract staff. Staff are particularly people coming out of, students coming out of university, millennials or Generation Z, are wanting quite different things from the workplace. And so organizations are recognizing that they need to deliver on more aspirational spaces, spaces that when somebody walks in, they don't just see a row of desks and going, right, you work there, sit down for 8 hours a day and then go home. Mm. People want to be working in places that deliver on all their physical, psychological and emotional needs throughout the day for a range of different tasks. And equally, we talk about diverse workplaces, places where people walk in and they immediately feel a sense of welcome. That as they walk in, they see that this is a space where they can not just survive, but also thrive and flourish. But what we feel is that it's much better to put people in a really good physical and mental state, so that when they are talking to one another, they're open and optimistic, positive. When they pick up the phone, they're feeling good, that they want to come to work, that they don't want to take a day off. And so our approach is very human-centered and just trying to get as many people as possible to feel as good as possible when they step into the workplace.
Speaking of days off and people feeling stressed about going into work, are there any statistics to show that a biophilic-centered design of an office increases productivity and increases staff wellness as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is one of the most interesting areas. So some of the statistics associated with biophilic design. In education settings, for instance, when students have had an increased exposure to daylight, it can increase the speed of learning by between 20 and 25%. It can improve attendance by 3.5 days per year and improve test scores by between 5 and 14%.
Wow.
In the workplace, lots and lots of studies have demonstrated the benefits of views out onto nature or better views. So in one study, office workers were found to perform 10 to 25% better on tests of mental recall and function when they had the best possible view over the worst. Other studies have demonstrated when natural features have been applied to the interior of spaces, there's a 15% reduction in absenteeism. So imagine, the cost of absenteeism to businesses. We're all thinking about that at the moment.
Yeah.
And then there was a really sort of significant study of 7,600 people in 16 different countries around the world, undertaken by this company Interface, who I work with. And what they found was that actually 47% of workers who were interviewed had no natural light at their desk. 58% didn't have plants in their office. But what they found was that workers with natural features in their office, self-reported, recognized in themselves, a 15% higher level of well-being. When people feel a greater level of well-being in the workplace, they obviously are going to feel more valued. They're going to feel more engaged, more creative, more able to have more positive, open communications. And as a result of that, we're 6% more productive and 15% more creative. So for me, these statistics are evidence that the work that we do as human-centered designers can deliver very tangible results, not just for the people who work in buildings, but also on the financial bottom line for the people who we're working with directly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're selling this as a concept to clients, you must reel out these statistics and say, if you think about this human-centered design, you are actually going to increase productivity. And that must spark their interest more than anything, because that's what they're focusing on, really, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you go to work to make money and to be profitable. And we forget, we spend 90% of our lives indoors, and that's in ordinary circumstances, probably more so now. And so, of course, the spaces that we surround ourselves in are going to have a dramatic impact on our physical, mental, and emotional states. And of course, we're all feeling that now as we tend to be going to less and less places in this period of lockdown. But the space that we're surrounding ourselves is having a tangible effect on us. So, what are those things, the drivers that really make us feel better, make us feel happier, more relaxed?
Well,
to help overcome physical and mental exhaustion or stress.
that was going to be my next question, actually. I mean, for companies with small budgets who are really interested in what you've said, what are the things people can do at the most basic level to increase staff wellness and bring a touch of biophilic design into their workplace?
There are lots of very simple things that you can do, recognizing existing opportunities, the natural light that comes into a space and how you get people to connect with that, the positioning of desks. Maybe it's about making the most of the local environment. Are there parks? Are there walking meeting routes? It could be about introducing plants and greenery to walls, to desks, to communal spaces. It could be about adding colours and textures and patterns to walls. You know, some of these things can either be free, they can be relatively cheap to implement. You know, it's not about money necessarily, it is about creativity. It's understanding the stresses and strains that happen within people and how damaging they are within an organization, and how we can harness the benefits of nature in all sorts of different ways.
Now, you mentioned Agile Working a little bit earlier when you were talking about, you know, people don't just need the standard boardrooms, small meeting rooms, banks of desks. When people get back to the office and they're looking at their desk for the first time, what do you think people are going to be thinking? Where do you see people going in the future of workplace design?
Well, I think first of all, there's going to be enhanced recognition of the potential flexibility of people, not just sitting at a desk. But I think also there's going to be a recognition of just how important face-to-face communication is. Whilst these sorts of digital systems like Zoom are great, and I can see you and you can see me, and we can have these kind of like these conversations, it's still not the same as having a face-to-face conversation and literally sitting around a table and being creative. And I think that sense of community that comes from people sitting in a space is going to be recognized, that we need something of a balance. So I think when we get back, we're going to recognize that need for a greater sense of diversity in the way that individuals work on a daily basis, a weekly basis, monthly, but also just how important communities are. And we really believe that sense of community is sort of fundamental to people to be creative.
I absolutely completely agree. I think when people get back to the office, they're going to realise how much they've missed their colleagues. Now, lots of people have mentioned Agile Working as a way forwards. Do you see that as a trend? Do you think that's where office design is leading to?
Well, yeah, maybe it's task-based working. Maybe it's about recognising what it is that's got to be done and how we deliver on spaces that will help people complete that task. It's also worth recognising the sense of sort of neurodiversity that we have. It's important to recognise that we all work in different ways and have different requirements. So it is in part about recognizing people's sensory sensitivities and the diversity of the workforce and how you deliver on their needs, and not just sort of going into a space going, hey, look, open plan workspace, everybody works in this room. And I think the need for recognizing the diversity of the people and the needs of those people in the workplace is going to be important, and how we deliver spaces that support those people and the tasks that they're undertaking is going to be absolutely critical. And I think, some people will be working at home and absolutely fine. Other people will be crawling up the walls going, I really need to have a face-to-face meeting, and recognizing how important that is for creative thinking and coming up with new ideas.
So the future of workplaces is focused on the people.
Absolutely. It's all about being human-centered. Yeah. And what we say is, well, how does the space make you feel? And how can we design this space to make you feel better, to deliver on the intended task of that space?
I think that's a brilliant point to finish with. How does the space make you feel? And I think everyone's going to realise how their workspace makes them feel on day one when they get back to the workplace. Thank you so much for your time today. I think people will know a lot more about biophilic design and what it means now. Thank you.
That's been a pleasure.
And speak to you soon.
Yep. Stay safe and well.
Bye.
And remember, these days will pass.
They will.